Hey, we are tonight. We are continuing a series entitled "Dream Again," "Dream Again," and it really sort of, if I were to say there was sort of a theme verse that kind of encapsulates this series, we kind of find it in Acts chapter 2, verse 10, and it says this: "It says in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions," and this is the part I love at the end, "your old men and old women will dream dreams." Will dream dreams. I love that. In other words, one of the marks of the last days is really a church full of dreamers. People with the courage and the faith to just sort of dream again. And in fact, I always kind of find that really interesting because oftentimes I think, especially when we hear kind of that term "last days," which, by the way, if you don't already know, we are, I believe, in the last days. But oftentimes when we think of the last days, I think a lot of us, we tend to think a little bit more of the nightmarish scenarios that we read about in Scripture. In fact, I remember when I was in high school, one of my buddies invited me to a youth group night, and I remember showing up there, and man, it was awesome. Like right off the bat, like they had punch, they had cake, they had pizza, and it was like they had streamers, and a whole party atmosphere, and I'm just like, man, this is great. This is a good time. And then about halfway through it, they roll out this old colored TV, the big box ones that have the nice flat screen like right now. And they roll it out, and they're like, it's a movie night. And I'm like, awesome, can this get any better? And so I'm sitting there, I got my punch, and I got my popcorn, and all of a sudden I see this image of a clock on the screen. And the movie title, Thief in the Night. Anyone ever seen the movie Thief in the Night? See, back in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, there was all these apocalyptic kind of end times movies that came out, all intent on just really scaring you into heaven. I mean, talk about freaking you out. Like, I remember watching, like, oh my goodness. I remember, when I went home that night, I remember, just like, Mom, Dad, you home? Man, I was so worried. And like when they didn't respond instantly, I'm like, that's it. They've been raptured away. I've been left behind, right? And and again, there is some, obviously there's some truth in that. The Bible does talk about tribulation. Now, we're not, a lot of different theologians have a lot of different takes on when the tribulation is going to happen, whether pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib. I tend to be a pan-trib guy, which is simply that it pans out all in the end, right? But while we're not clear of when sort of the nightmarish side of the last days of the tribulation is going to be, the one thing we're very clear on is that one of the things that's going to mark the last days is a church, is men and women, people who are dreamers, who are willing to look at their lives and look at the reality of their lives, not through a natural lens, but through a supernatural lens. To believe. See, what I love about that verse is I believe it's more than just prophetic. I believe it's a promise. That when you and I really walk by faith, allow the Spirit to lead and guide our lives, what we find is this promise for your life and my life that our last days can actually be our best days. Our last days can actually be some of our most significant days. And the reason I share that is it's kind of a great lead-in to the story and the character in the Bible that I want to talk about tonight, and who I think really embodies this reality. And it's a guy by the name of Noah. And most of us, we're pretty familiar with a lot of Noah's story, but typically when we think of Noah, we think of the part sort of before the storm and during the storm. Like we think of Noah, the guy, building the ark, building the boats, saving Washington, D.C. from a flood. Okay, that's like heaven almighty. I don't remember. But we think about that, or we think of Noah making it through the storm, navigating this ark, surviving the storm. But what we don't always hear about, and we don't always think about, is after the storm. It is after the storm. And I love this kind of portion of Scripture. We find it actually in Genesis chapter 8, and we're going to be looking at verses 15 through 20. And what I love about Noah's story in this is we're going to come to discover through Noah's life is that Noah would actually really embody that kind of promise in Acts. Here's a guy who actually come to discover actually his best days were actually in his last days. In fact, I like how Genesis 9:28, when speaking of sort of his life after the storm, after the struggle, after the heartache of life, it says, after the flood, Noah lived 350 years. In other words, Noah lived more, and he lived longer, and he lived a fuller life after the storm, after the heartache, after the struggle, than he did before. And look, I share that with you because really my hope tonight is really simply to kind of encourage you. Encourage anyone who's ever gone through a storm, who's ever gone through a struggle, who's ever gone through a heartache, is that I really believe that the promise of the Bible, the promise of the gospel, the promise in Acts, and the promise from Noah's story is that your last days can actually still be your best days, that there's life after the storm. There's life after the heartache. There's life after the disappointment. As tonight, my goal is really just simply to really encourage you. There's not going to be a whole lot of how-to in this, because I really think it really doesn't matter the how-to if there's no want-to. Like next week, we'll get a little more into the how-tos of how to really dream again. But I really felt impressed tonight. I just want to take some moments just to speak to the want-to. Because again, if there's no want-to, the how-to really doesn't matter much. Like I've got a fence in the backyard. I know how to fix it. But because the want-to's not been there, that thing for 2 years now has left and still in need of repair. And so I want to kind of speak to that because I think especially after the storm, after we've lived some life, or maybe we're at a point where we feel like we're really in sort of our last days, where it feels like there's more life behind us than actually in front of us. My hope, again, is to encourage you again and again throughout this story tonight, is that, man, your best days, I really do believe, are in front of you. That there's still life to be lived, even after the storm and the heartache. And so we're going to jump right into this, and specifically we're going to look at two things that if you and I want to really step into and really discover kind of life again after the storm, let alone dream again after the storm, that we really need to take hold of. And so we jump into this, Genesis chapter 8, verses 15 through 17. It starts out, it says, "Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you." I find it interesting that his first command is come out. Come out. Because you got to understand, when this statement, this command comes to Noah, Noah has actually been in the ark for about a year now. In fact, some stars actually say just a little over a year he has been in this boat. Now you're like, okay, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the problem is that the storm actually only lasted for 40 days, 40 nights. So he's been riding in the boat. He's been in survival mode all this time. And so we find God sitting there saying, no, hey, look, you need to come out. It's time to move beyond just survival mode. It's time to move beyond just getting by, just making it through. There's some life still to be lived. There's a promise still to be taken hold of. And I love that, because how many of you know sometimes a storm can be over and yet you still not be over the storm? A storm can be over, a struggle can be over, a heartbreak can be over, and yet you still not be over it. And in fact, we see this very much in Noah's life, very much in Noah's predicament. Because in the storm, listen, when you're in a storm, you've got to kind of go in survival mode, right? I mean, when you're in a storm, when you're going through a struggle, you're going through hard times, sometimes all you're able to do is really operate in survival mode. You do what you got to do to make it through. In fact, sometimes you don't even realize just how much strength you've got, how much ability you got, until you kind of pick yourself up the bootstraps and you kind of make your way through. Like when you're in survival mode, how many know you'll do whatever you got to do. You'll take the extra night classes. You'll read the books. You'll ask for help. You'll build the boat. You'll do what you got to do to survive. And yet, and while that helps you, that sort of mindset of I'm going to do whatever it takes to kind of make it through, while it might have helped you and helped sustain you through one season, listen, if we're not careful, sometimes I've found the very thing that might have sustained us in one season can actually restrain us in the next. Sometimes the thing that helps sustain us in one season can actually help restrain us from the next. Yeah, in survival mode, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes just to wake up in the morning, sometimes just to put one foot right in front of the other, right? But with that, when you're in survival mode, there also kind of comes a mindset. And that mindset oftentimes is very much focused on ourselves. Like when you're in survival mode, it's very much about self-preservation. It's very much about how am I going to stay alive, right? It's kind of like the classic preacher story, and you guys have all, I'm sure, heard this before, but two hunters were out in the woods, and they come across a bear, and the one guy's like, man, don't move, because if that bear comes charging at us, there's no way you're going to be able to outrun him. And so about the moment he says that, his friend is taking off running. And he's like, what are you doing? You can't outrun the bear. You can't outrun the bear. And he looks back and he says, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just got to outrun you. And listen, a lot of us, that's kind of, when you're in survival mode, your natural instinct is to kind of think that way. It's about self-preservation. It's about me. It's about how am I going to get through this? How am I going to make it through? But listen, while that can serve you for a season, it can serve you through the storm. Listen, there comes a point where that same mindset that thing that might have sustained us in one season, if we're not careful, it can restrain us from the next. And so listen, the first thing for you and I, if we hope to really live again after the storm, after the heartbreak, after the struggle, for some of us, it starts with learning to shift our focus from survival mode to significance. And how many know there's a difference? Survival mode from significance. See, survival is very much all about me. The focus is on me and my preservation, but significance is always focused on others. And this is so key, because listen, for you and I that live a significant life, listen, I can't live a significant life as long as it's all about me. I can't live a significant life if I'm just simply worried about me. I can't live a significant life if it's all about today. And sometimes, again, when you're in survival mode, that's all you're thinking about is today. You're not really thinking about tomorrow. But significance thinks beyond that. It thinks beyond just simply today. It thinks beyond simply myself. And so, and we see this in Genesis 8, verse 15 through 17, and kind of how God instructs him and really challenges him to live again, to dream again. It says that God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. But here's the second part of this. Notice it says, bring out every kind of living creature that is with you. You need to come out. It's time to come out. You've been living on survival mode. You've been living just getting by. You've been living just to make it through for long enough. It's time to come out. It's time to step into a new season. But listen, for you to step into a new season, it's going to require you not just to come out, but you've got to be willing to bring out. You've got to be willing to bring some other people along. You've got to be willing to help some other people out. And that leads us to kind of the first thing, again, if you're going to live again, that you and I have to get hold of. And that's simply, you've got to discover and realize that there's purpose after the storm. There's purpose after the storm. See, something you and I got to get is that he didn't just save you from what he saved you from. He didn't just pull you out from the disappointment he pulled you out of, the heartache he pulled you out of, the relationship woes he pulled you out of. He didn't just save you and rescue you just for you. He didn't save you and rescue you just so you could get the t-shirt that said I survived. Remember when those t-shirts were like really popular, like I survived Mount St. Helens, I survived Shark Week, right? No, he didn't just save you so you could die here instead of there, to live in survival mode. He saved you for significance. And listen, anytime God brings you through a storm, one of the questions you and I always have to ask ourselves is why? Why did he bring me through what he brought me through? Why did he bring me through that heartache? Why did he bring me through that disappointment? Why did he bring me through that breakup? And why did he rescue me? And listen, I'm telling you, the truth is, one of the things you've got to get hold of if you want to live a life of significance, if you want to live again after the storm, you've got to understand that God didn't just save you just for you. God didn't just save you just for you. Now, don't get me wrong. God loves you. You're the apple of his eye. If you were the only person on earth, he would have come on that cosmic rescue mission from heaven, died on a cross just simply to rescue you, right? But he didn't save you just for you. He saved you so you could help save others. He brought you out so you could help bring somebody else out. It's kind of like if you've ever been on an airplane flight more than a couple times. I remember when you first step into an airplane, like the first time you fly, like you're really listening to the instructions by the flight attendant. Like you're reading the little manual, like you're following right along. You're getting ready, like, why aren't you listening to this, right? But if you've flown more than a couple times, how many know it can be really easy to start to sort of ignore the pre-flight instructions, right? I mean, you're listening to it, but you just kind of start to just completely ignore it. Because let's be honest, if you ever need those flotation devices, it's over anyway, right? Like there's something that kind of clicks in your mind, like if I ever need half the instructions she's giving me right now, it's over. It's over. Like the only reason they tell you those instructions is just to make you feel a little bit better, to make you feel like you've actually got a chance if that plane's going down. But the truth is, and a little side note here, but the plane's going down, honestly, the best thing you can do is really just be praying. Get right with God. Forget the seatbelt, forget all the other instructions, but anyway, that's a little side note, a little pre-flight instruction for any of you who are actually flying anytime soon. But one of the instructions, getting back to the pre-flight instructions, one of the instructions they give you is they say, if the cabin air pressure were to drop, is that you can expect these little oxygen masks to kind of drop down in front of you. And what's the instruction? What do they tell you to do with that first? Somebody listened a little bit. Yeah, somebody was ignoring those pre-flight instructions. Yeah. You put it on yourself first, and then you put it on somebody else. And I love that because really that's a picture of the gospel. Like Jesus, that's his heart for you. That's why he came down from heaven and died on the cross. It's to rescue you, to save you, to pull you out of sheer destruction, right? But it's not meant to simply stop at that. He didn't just save you just for you. Save you just to put on the oxygen mask for yourself. I mean, think how tragic it would be if the plane's going down, you pull the oxygen mask out, and you just start fumbling around with it because it's not fitting real good. And it's just ignoring everyone around you, ignoring your wife next to you, ignoring the kids around you, ignoring the people around you. Like, it's just not really comfortable. And you're looking at it, it's like, this yellow, it's not matching it. It's clashing with the red of my shirt. It's not good. And you're taking a selfie with it. And you're like, does this make my face look large? How tragic that would be. All the while, everyone else who's dependent on you. Dependent on you not just living for your survival, but living a life of significance. Recognizing God didn't just save you to save you, but to help save others. How tragic it would be if you didn't take that step. If you were so worried about your survival that you forgot about God's call to significance. Again, God didn't just save you just for you. You haven't been through all that you've been through just for you. You've made it through what you made it through. Listen, ultimately, to help somebody else make it through what they're going through as well. Because listen, something you got to get is the truth is that God never wastes a pain. He never wastes a tear. He never wastes a struggle. And it would be tragic to just go through what you went through and not use it to help somebody else. I like how Jesus puts it in Matthew 10:8. He says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. In other words, if I've done it for you, man, what's to keep you from helping do it for others, right? Like if somehow you were sick and God pulled you out of that, you've been healed, how can you not encourage somebody else who's going through that same struggle? If once you felt dead but you've been raised, if once you were unclean and now you have a clean slate through his grace, if once you were oppressed and now delivered. Listen, we're not called just simply to be a recipient, but we're called to reciprocate that to others. What God has done in our life, how God has delivered us, how God has shown up in us, right? And so, again, we come out of the storm, when we come out of tough seasons, and this is so important, we got to realize that God didn't just bring me through that for no reason. Like there's a reason for it. There's a purpose on the other side of your pain. There's a message on the other side of that mess. And here's why this matters, especially as we talk about, what is, we're talking about this God dream, God's purpose for my life, but what is that? How do I even know, what that dream is, what that big purpose is? Yeah, I need to help others, but what does that really look like? And listen, I found this, and the part of the reason I share all this with you is that your misery is often the start of your ministry. Your misery is often the start of your ministry. In fact, I dare say, all significant ministry starts with some type of misery. Every great ministry starts with some mess. And in fact, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but you look through Scripture, so often when it comes to discovering our purpose, kind of in a worldly sense, in kind of the day and age we live in, oftentimes when it comes to, hey, what am I supposed to do? What do I need to do with my life? What am I called to do with my life? Oftentimes, most people sit there, well, just do what you love to do. Just do what you're passionate about. And what's interesting, when you look through the Bible, when it comes to God revealing His purpose and God revealing a God dream in someone's life, He never starts with, what do you love to do? What are you passionate about? It's not like, Moses, what am I going to do with you? Moses, tell me, what do you like to do? What do you like to do? Public speaking? I know you got the stammering thing, but is that, do you like to speak? Or David, hey, you like taking down giants? I need a fighter. Like, he never starts that way. And never when he's sharing a vision and calling someone to greater things, calling a dream out of someone's life, purpose out of someone's life, he never starts with what you love or what you're passionate about. More often than not, he starts with your misery. The misery you went through. The struggle you went through. Or the struggle somebody else is going through. Is seeing their hurt and seeing their misery. For Moses, it was seeing the suffering of his people. The heartache of his people and slavery and bondage to the Egyptians. And God calling him out, saying, listen, I'm calling you to be a deliverer. To be a deliverer, to step out. See, again, oftentimes it's your misery that's oftentimes the start of your ministry. And listen, so often we struggle to ever dream again, let alone live again, because oftentimes we want the message but not the mess. We want the ministry but not the misery. We want the impact, but we don't want to have to go through anything to get it. And so when misery comes into my life, it ought to be the lens actually through which I evaluate my ministry. My pain, where it actually becomes the very way I actually interpret my purpose. I don't know what to do in my life. What's God's purpose in my life? Listen, you start to actually discover what that is. Listen, start with what you've gone through. Start with how God, the place that God pulled you out of, the place that God pulled you through, the misery you came out of and came through, right? And in fact, I like how C.S. Lewis speaks to this and how God oftentimes will reveal our purpose through our pain, our ministry, through our misery. He says that God whispers to us in pleasures. He speaks in our consciousness, but shouts in our pains. But shouts in our pains. I like that. See, discovering God's purpose for your life most often starts by evaluating and looking. What has He brought me through? What's He brought me through? Did He pull you through that divorce? Did He pull you through that failure? Did He pull you through that addiction? You want to discover God's big purpose, God's dream in your life. For a lot of us, it starts right there. That's how it started for Noah. In fact, it's really interesting. In Genesis 9:20, when it's describing Noah, and really this kind of call of God on his life to really dream again. Listen to how it describes Noah. It says, Noah, a man of the soil, began to plant a vineyard. Noah, a man of the soil, began to plant a vineyard. I love that phrase, because what's intriguing to me is, how many of us ever think of Noah as a man of the soil? Like, most of us, right? Like, when we think of Noah, in fact, I actually asked my boys, like, hey, who's Noah? And he's a guy who built a boat, right? Like we think of Noah as someone who sailed, someone who sailed the 7 seas. He battled the flood. Again, like Evan Almighty, saved Washington, D.C. Like, we think of him on water. We think of him battling the flood. We don't think of a man of the soil, right? But the truth is that God had a bigger purpose for him than just survival. right? And I love the fact the Bible doesn't define him by what he went through. Yes, he built an ark, but he was not a shipbuilder. That was not how the Bible defines him. And by the way, I think this is really important for some of us to hear, because I found if we're not careful, sometimes we'll allow our lives to be defined by what we went through. Be defined through the failure we went through, the addiction we went through, the struggle we went through. Never stepping into a new season for our lives because we continue to allow the last season to define us. Right? And yet here in Noah's story, I love it. Again, here God in defining him, describing him, doesn't define him by what he went through. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Yeah, what he went through would refine him, but it didn't define him. It would refine his purpose. It would refine his calling. It would refine God's dream on his life. But it didn't define him. Right? And so it's here. God's challenging Noah basically to dream again. I know you've spent 120 years, just building a boat and sailing the seas, but he's trying to reawaken this dream that your purpose, there's purpose after the storm, there's purpose after all the destruction, there's purpose after this flood, Noah. And I love that because when you think about it too, it says he was a man of the soil and he planted a vineyard, which for me kind of leads this question of where did he get the seeds from? Like where did he get the seeds to plant this vineyard? Where did he get the seeds for his dream, the seeds for his purpose? Listen, because again, you got to remember, everything had been destroyed. Everything was underwater, and we're not just talking a little bit of flooding here. We're talking everything of life under this brackish salt. It would have killed everything there, including seeds, including every sense of plant life, right? But I love this because I think the only answer you can really come up with, and unless I found this true in my life, and I think you find it true in your life, is that the seeds of your purpose, they always have to be pulled from your past. The seeds from your purpose always have to be pulled from your past. Yeah, the past, again, doesn't define us, but it can refine us. Sure, we don't live in our past, but if we're not careful, some of us will run so fast away from what God pulled us out of, what we came out of, that we'll leave some of the lessons, we'll leave some of the seeds, we'll leave some of the things that we've gained, the value we've gained from that. We'll leave it behind. And when God's calling, I think, many of us to bring with us the very thing he wants to bring out of us. Because listen, you're not really out of what you came out of until you can plant a vineyard with the seed of your struggle. You ever really come through what you've been through? You're not really through it until you help somebody else get through it on the other side. There's purpose after the storm. There's a purpose after the storm, but I'm telling you, it's a purpose way bigger than just you. And again, if you don't know where that's at, hey, start with where God brought you through, what God brought you out of, right? So again, after the storm, there's purpose, but there's something else, and we'll start to kind of wrap up with this, but in Genesis 8:20, we start to see this. Listen, if you're going to live again, if you're going to dream again, you got to understand there's purpose after the storm, but there's also something else. When we see this Genesis 8:20, he comes out of the boat, he brings others with him, right? And then Genesis 8:20 says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord. An altar to the Lord. And this is the second thing. If you're going to hope to live again after the storm, dream again after the storm, you got to understand and you got to get perspective after the storm. You got to get perspective after the storm. I find it interesting that of all the things that Noah would, when he first gets out of the boat, start to build, is that he would start to build an altar. And listen, think about it. It's not like he didn't have like 500 other things on the honey-do list, right? Like the house to build, the fence to keep the animals in. No doubt he's looking out. The weather's beautiful. He's like, man, I really want. Man, this would be, next week would be a great time to barbecue, but the only way I can actually have meat to barbecue next week is I got to build stables for the cows so I can have steak. He's probably thinking of all this stuff. And yet, before he does anything, he starts by rebuilding, by building an altar, this place of worship. And let's share this, because sometimes we sort of underestimate sort of the significance and importance of our worship. The significance and importance of just pausing to really get perspective in many ways, right? Because listen, I put in my notes this way, is I really believe that the first step to rebuilding your world is rebuilding your worship. The first step to rebuilding your world is rebuilding your worship. And in fact, it's interesting, the moment that he pauses to worship God after the storm, he rebuilds this altar. It's interesting what happens. Verse 22, it says, while the earth continues to exist, planting time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease. In other words, what's God doing here? He's reestablishing the seasons. New seasons, new time again. And I love that because I think for some of us, the very reason we feel constantly stuck in a season of survival is this right here. Is we fail to rebuild the altar. We fail to just stop and worship our God. Listen, you want to step into a new season and get unstuck from an old season. Listen, I believe it really starts with this. It starts with worshiping our God. It starts with changing your perspective. Because, look, I believe before you can see change in your life, it takes changing how you see your life. And that only happens through worship. That only happens through a perspective change. And that perspective change only happens through worship. It only happens through praise. Because praise is always the product of proper perspective. That's a lot of P's for you there. Praise is always the product of proper perspective. And I think this is important for us, because I think sometimes we think praise is about perfection. But praise is not the product of a perfect circumstance. I don't praise God because it's perfect in my life. I praise God because I got perspective. I praise God because I got perspective on my life. And listen, I think some of us were waiting. Well, I'll worship God when things get better. I'll show up to church when things get better. I'll start, getting my stuff together when things start working out for me. God, when you do this, and you're missing it. So many of us were like, I'll worship you if things start to come together, if I get the job I want, the relationship works out, I worship you if, and I wonder how many of us, God would say, no, if you will worship, I will. We're waiting on the circumstance to change while God is waiting on our perspective to change. Waiting on our perspective to change. And listen, again, that only happens through worship. That only happens when we rebuild the altar, when we put him in his proper place, first and foremost in our lives. We give him the glory and the praise that he's been due. And listen, I get the pushback. Well, Pastor, you don't understand. I've been through too much in my life. And listen, what I love about Noah's response is Noah's like I've been through too much in my life to not give him praise, to not give him worship. Noah, again, the very first thing he does is like, I'm looking around and there's destruction, and there's some things that they go the way that I thought they would go. But again, his praise wasn't predicated on perfection. His praise was rooted out of perspective. He looked around to his left and to his right, and he's like, I'm not going to focus on what's left, or what left, I'm going to focus on what's left. I'm going to focus on what I have. It's this worship. It's what the Bible says, let everything that has breath. Listen, if you're alive, you can breathe. Let's breathe in and say, man, God, I thank you that I'm alive. I thank you for what you brought me through, what you carried me through. Because listen, God's carried you through some stuff that listen, he didn't carry everyone else through. Like there's some things that you've made it through that other people never made it through. There's some heartaches that you've made it through that no one else made it through. Some breakups, some disappointments, some divorces that some people never made it to the other side through. But God in his grace carried you through. God in his grace pulled you through. And listen, just to be honest here, I think some of us, we need too much to praise God. Like some of us, we need everybody to act nice to us. Some of you need 24 likes on your last Facebook post before you give them praise. Some of you need a raise every Friday. And everything's just going right. And yet here's Noah in the middle of a world that let's be honest, it didn't look so great. He's like, you know what? Again, I'm not going to focus on what left, but on who's left. He looked at his right and his left on how God has blessed him, how God provided for him, what God had pulled him out of. Right? And again, in the middle of a world that to be honest, When he looked at the destruction around him, the flood and what it did around him, you got to understand, remember, this flood, it wasn't his fault either. In fact, the Bible's really clear. Noah was a godly. He walked with God. He was perfect in his generation, which means that he was, for the most part, without fault, amongst some of the others of contemporaries of his time, right? And yet this flood, in other words, this flood, it wasn't his doing. Like, he didn't cause it. It was somebody else's flood. Somebody else did this to him. And it would have been really easy to look at the destruction of the flood, sit there and say, you know what? Just feel like it's not fair. It's not fair. I can't worship God because it's not fair. Like, what happened to me, it's not fair. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I didn't do anything to bring this on myself, right? And listen, some of us, that's how we can kind of approach worship. Again, we look for things to be perfect as opposed to a praise that comes out of perspective. And so we look around, we look at things that aren't fair, and we think, well, it's not my fault. Why would I worship God when I'm going through this suffering, I'm going through this pain that I didn't cause? It was He was the one who decided to cheat. He was the one who left, or she was the one who left me and left me with this sense of just this gaping hurt and wound in my life. And Noah, if anyone had a reason to sort of just sit back and pout, make it all about himself, and so they'd say, it's not fair. Noah instead lifts his hands, builds an altar, lifts his hands, and worships God. Listen, sometimes you've got to make a decision to worship. Sometimes when worship doesn't make sense. And so the first thing he does, he doesn't build a new house, he doesn't build a new barn, he builds an altar, and he starts with a new perspective on old problems. And listen, here's the cool thing about that. When we learn to do these things, when we learn to step out after the storm, to trust in the very promise of God that there's still life after the storm. When we learn to trust in that, we learn to realize that there's purpose after the storm. That there's a praise that can be found, a perspective that can be found after the storm. There's this incredible promise that's given to Noah. And again, we started off sharing this verse right at the beginning, but kind of wrap up with it. And it's in Genesis 9:28. And again, it just simply says, after the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Again, after the storm, Noah lived. After the struggle, Noah lived. Some of you, listen, you need to give God praise at the storm. You need to know it's not the end of your story. It's not what defines you. It's not the finish of you. Listen, after the divorce, after the failure, after the mistake, after the depression, after the bankruptcy, after the brokenness, after the loss, Noah lived. Noah lived more life after the fact than he ever did before it. God did more through his life after the storm than he ever did before. And listen, I believe that's God's promise for you tonight. And again, that's really why I share this. It is simply, again, it's not a how-to, it's just to encourage you. Because I think there's some of you coming here tonight, and again, you're just coming out of a storm. Or maybe you're in the storm, you're in the struggle. You're in the relationship issues. You're in the struggle at work. You're in the struggle with family members. And you're sitting there, you're on survival mode. And you're having a hard time believing, dream again, every person. And listen, I'm telling you, again, that's the very promise of God. Just like there was life for Noah after the storm, you need to know that you know there is life after your storm. There's life after your storm. I want to pray for you tonight. And Father God, I pray especially for those who come in here. And again, there's just sort of this weight of heaviness, this weight of discouragement that again, when we look at what we're wrestling with, we look at the storms in our life, we look at the struggles, it can be so easy to kind of get on that survival mode. And it can be so easy to get stuck in a season and think because of what I've gone through or because of where I'm at, that this is how it's always going to be. That loss I faced, I'm always going to be in it. The hurt that I'm going through, I'm always going to be wrestling with it. The rejection that was put on me, I'm always going to be dealing with that. And yeah, listen, I wonder if God brought you here tonight to remind you that no, there's life after the storm. There's life after the storm. There's a purpose on the other side of your pain. There's perspective on the other side of your hurt. When you and I have the courage to step out of the boat, to live for something bigger than just ourselves, and to see something specifically, the one who's so much bigger than us, and to focus and set our focus and set our attention on the one who's over the storm, who's bigger than the problem, who's bigger than the hurt, who's bigger than the heartache. And listen, I believe that if you'll do that, if you'll learn to give him praise even in the storm, even after the storm, again, I believe with all my heart that he's gonna take some of what you went through. And as you worship him, he's gonna not just set you free from last season so that you can step forward into a new season. But he's gonna reveal some purpose. He's gonna reveal some dreams that maybe have long since gone dormant because you thought, how could God ever use me? When I think of my failure and I think of my setback, so some dreams that have gone dormant because you're just so busy just trying to survive, just trying to make it through. You didn't even have time to think about tomorrow. You're so focused on today. But if you'll worship God, you'll give him the praise he's due during the storm and after the storm. I'm telling you, he's going to reveal some purpose. He's going to reveal some dreams in your life and remind you that your last days don't have to be your worst days. But with God, they can be your best days. Your best days are in front of you. The best days of God's purpose are in front of you. Of your significance are in front of you. They're not behind you. Father, we pray this. We take hold of this promise. In Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand up. Let's worship our